Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Monday Night Live. I'm Tanja from Tanja Kraus Horsemanship, and tonight I am going to be talking about float loading do's and don'ts. So this is a little topic that comes up pretty often at clinics, and I'm really looking forward to sharing it with you. So please let me know when you're here so I can get started, or I'm going to get started, but please let me know when you're here anyway by clicking one of the icons or making a comment and sharing with anyone or tagging someone that you know may be interested in this Monday Night Live. When it comes to float loading, I want to share with you some of the tips that I personally use. Obviously, I am on the road a lot with my horses, and I'm traveling around a fair bit. I need to make sure that I keep myself and my horses as safe as I possibly can. And what I do is I follow a certain amount of processes when I'm float loading. So the first thing that I want to talk about is setting yourself up for success. So in my line of work, I guess I get to meet a lot of people that are traveling with their horses, obviously, because they're coming to my clinics or coming to events that I'm at or things like that. And one of the things that I see pretty often is they go to load their horse the way that they normally load their horse, that they've never had problems loading their horse like that before, and someone who has all the great intentions in the world comes along and says, oh, you shouldn't load your horse like that because, you should self-load, or you should always lead him in, or you should do this, or you should do that. And what they do is they try and change the way that they're loading the horse at the event that time. So, hey Gwenda, so I'm not saying, obviously tonight I'm on this feed sharing with you the ways that I personally load my horses, and if they make sense to you, you might decide to adopt those ways. But you need to set yourself up for success, and what I mean by that is making sure that if you're going to change the way that your horse knows how to load, you need to take the time and set this time aside to do that in a way that's going to be effective, and understand that you're retraining your horse. So if you normally lead him onto the float, which I don't do, and my next point is to teach your horse to self-load, and I'll talk about why in a minute, the minute you try and self-load him, he's going to go, oh, this isn't the way we load. I normally follow you onto the float, and that's normal, and a lot of horses are taught to trailer load in that way. So when you try and change something, you have to allow yourself enough time to help the horse understand that you are changing it and what your expectation is. There's no point in being at a show and then someone comes along and says, hey, you shouldn't be loading your horse that way, and you try and do it their way. It's just not going to work. So stick to what is successful for you. If it takes you 2 people to load your horse, then keep loading your horse with 2 people until you've got the time to set aside and teach him how to self-load or lead on or whatever it is that you're going to do. So that's number 1. Set you and your horse up for success, and stick to what you're successful at until you have a good reason to change it. Number 2, do teach your horses to self-load. This is a huge thing for me. I travel alone a lot. Probably 95% of the time I'm alone with my horses. So my number 1 reason for self-loading is that I need to do it. I need to be able to put them on my own, and I need to be able to do up the back, and we're going to talk about that process in a minute. But when I'm by myself, I don't want to have a Three Stooges situation happening where I lead the horse into the trailer, and then by the time I get out of the front door and get to the back to shut the back, he's already unloading himself off the float. So I need to be able to point my horse at the float, and I need my horses to be able to get on there by themselves so I can do everything I need to do at the back. The second reason I do it, even if I do travel with people, even if you are always traveling with people and you've always got those multiple people that can, one can lead the horse in and then one can shut the back or whatever, you still want to be able to self-load your horses, because it's this, in my opinion, it's the safest place for you to be is not in the float with your horse. Obviously, or the trailer for the Americans watching, a float. In Australia here, we call it a float. I don't know why. I don't know where, the terminology comes from. Maybe some of you could share that with me if anyone knows where it comes from. But for my American watchers, it's the trailer. So that's what I'm talking about. Trailer loading do's and don'ts. Even if you have always got someone else, the last place I want to be is in that trailer with my horse. So I understand that even once the horse is self-loaded that I'm getting in the front to tie the horse up or something like that. But there's a lot less time of me being in the trailer with the horse when I teach him to self-load. And there's also the period of time where I'm potentially in front of my horse and leading him onto the trailer, and he is coming up the ramp. If he fell and tripped or something scared him from behind, and I'm in that moment and I haven't yet ducked under the chest bar. I have heard of times where people unfortunately have been crushed up against the chest bar. It's a really dangerous place for you to be, is inside the horse trailer with the horse. So I prefer to ask my horses to self-load or teach my horses to self-load, do up all the back, and then get in, tie them up, and then I'm in and out as quickly as I possibly can be. So it's a safety thing as well, and it also helps when you're traveling on your own. The third thing that I do is I adhere strictly to a process of loading, a series, a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 series of actions that I take, and I never stray from those actions. So what I mean by that is, hey Hillary, hey Mummy, and hey Steve. Mummy said loves the book. I'm glad you got it. That's excellent. So what I mean by that is I always ask my horses to self-load. I then do up the bum bar or the bum chain. I then do up the tailgate. I then get into the front of the trailer and I tie my horse up, and then I shut the front, and then I get in my car and I start driving. I never tie my horse up before the whole back is done up. So if your trailer has a bum bar and a tailgate and a storm door, all three of those things are done before I get in the front and I tie my horse up. When we tie our horses up in an open space and they get a fright and they pull back, they are a lot, if they've been trained to tie up, they are a lot more likely to be able to not panic and come forward off the pressure. When your horse is tied in a trailer and he's in a confined space and something frightens him and it causes him to pull back, he's more likely to react negatively and not come off the pressure and keep trying to pull back because he's in a confined space. So you've added claustrophobia to him being tied up. So what I have seen happen and what I have heard occur is people putting their horses in the trailer and tying them up, and then trying to close the back up. The horse gets a fright, maybe from the person being behind them, and the horse starts pulling back. He panics because he's in this confined area. He feels like he needs to get out of the trailer, and all hell breaks loose because he's pulling back in the trailer. If you've done up all the back bits first and the horse goes to step backwards, the back of the trailer is going to stop him and he's going to come forwards off that pressure. The difference is the back of the trailer is solid and he gets to come off that pressure, as opposed to it just being a pressure around his head while he's in an enclosed area. So I always do up the back of the trailer before I tie my horse up, and then when I'm unloading, I always untie my horse, go around the back, drop the tailgate or open the storm door, drop the tailgate and undo the bum bar, and then ask my horse to quietly come off. Because using the same principle, if he panics at any time during that situation, either the back is going to stop him or everything's going to be open and he's going to be able to quickly but safely exit the trailer, and then I can spend time reloading him. He's not going to be trapped by his head. So the process that I use is load, do up the bum bar, do up the tailgate, do the storm door, tie the horse up, and then when I'm unloading, I untie the horse, undo the storm door, undo the tailgate, undo the bum bar, and then ask the horse to come off the trailer. Something that I always do as well is I go through those loading and unloading processes. I'm not going to say quickly and I'm not going to say swiftly, but I don't waste time. So I've seen people pull up at events and they've opened the bum bar, they've opened the tailgate, and then they go around and get something to clean up the poo, and they'll clean up the poo, and then they'll see a friend and they'll start talking to their friend, and the horse is wanting to get out of the trailer, or maybe the horse is quite quiet and he's standing in the trailer, and that's all fantastic. But there's potentially going to be an occasion where your horse doesn't want to stand in the trailer anymore. He's going to try and get off the trailer, and there's going to be an incident because you haven't just gone through the motions. I can't tell you the number of times that I've seen people to pull up at events and drop the tailgate and even open the front door of the trailer and let the horse stand in there with air, and expect that just the tailgate, just the bum bar is going to hold the horse in there. Yes, if the horse just steps backwards and comes off the pressure of the bum bar, that's going to hold him in there. I've heard, and I personally know people whose horses have come underneath the bum bar and broken a wither because they've tried to get off the trailer without the bum bar being open. And I also know of horses that have flipped themselves over the top of the bum bar when they've been in a panic situation. So I'm not saying open everything and get the horse out as quickly as you possibly can and treat it like an emergency evacuation process, but I am saying, you must understand that your horse understands the process of pulling up at an event and, okay, we've stopped, we're going to get out of the trailer, she's dropped the tailgate, she's untied me, or she's untied me, she's dropped the tailgate. He's going to want to get off the trailer, so you need to complete that process. Don't get distracted, and, if you need to go to the bathroom or something like that, keep everything locked up as if you just pulled up at the traffic lights, go to the bathroom, and then come back and deal with the horse. Don't give him air in the trailer, because you're just opening yourself to a situation that could be very, very dangerous and could cause your horse or yourself a lot of damage. Opening the front door of the trailer is another thing that I get to see a fair bit of. And of course, I've seen all of these situations happen on multiple times without any incident whatsoever. But I've also seen these situations, or thankfully I've heard of these situations happening. And, we might like to think that they're one-off situations, but I've heard of too many of them for them to just be one-off situations. Our horses are pretty simple one-line thinkers. So if you've opened the front door of the trailer and your horse gets a fright and he feels like he needs to escape and he knows the back's done up and he knows you haven't undone any of the back, his instinct is going to be to try and get himself out of the front door. So we like to think that logically he knows that he can't fit out the front door, that logically he's going to make an assessment that I don't normally get out of the front door, so why would I get out of the front door? When your horse is in a panic situation, he's just going for the exit. He's just going to go for the hole that he sees, and he's more than likely going to try and push forward. So even when I pull up an event and I open my front door, I climb in and I untie my horse, I also push the door too. I won't necessarily relock it. I don't relock the front door, but I definitely close it so it's a much smaller gap. I don't open it and leave this big huge gap and then get in the trailer with my horses, because I don't want them thinking that the front exit is an exit. I was actually talking to someone else about this just in the last couple of weeks, and they told me how their horse had actually tried to exit the front door. I can't remember who that was. Actually, that might have been you, Sarah. Did I see you just log on before? I think it was Sarah. She was helping someone load, and she had left the front door open. So she had put her horse in, And I think that they had opened the chest bar as well, because her horse is such a giant horse and it wasn't his trailer and it was really small. So she had loaded him to give the other horse confidence about getting in the trailer, and he went out the front door. He just went, oh, well, this is a gap, I'm going to go. And thankfully he was all right and she was all right and everyone was all right. But the horse's instinct, even though he always backs off a trailer, was to go forward. That just occurred to me then when I was talking about it. So there's a recent occurrence, which thankfully no one got hurt, but it could have been a really bad situation. I mean, he's an absolutely massive horse, and it was pure luck that he was able to that he didn't hurt himself in the gap. When we're tying our horses in the trailer, we want to make sure that I leave my rope long enough that it is the back of the trailer stopping my horse, not his lead on his head. So the same principle as I spoke about earlier, when I'm tying him in the front of the trailer, I always have the back shut, but what I also want to make sure of is that it's actually the big door, like it's actually the back of the trailer that's stopping him, not just his lead. Because if it's just his lead, again, he might not be able to see that he's closed in or whatever, and if he starts to panic in there, and if he feels space behind him, he's more likely going to panic against the lead because he's in a confined space. Whereas if he just backs up to the end of the lead and it's actually the back of the trailer that stops him, he's more likely to step forward. Now, having said that, I don't want to tie him so long that when he puts his head down, he gets the rope over the back of his head. That can be a dangerous situation as well. And I don't want to tie him so long that when he gets to the back of that tie, that if you've got a stallion divider or something like that, that he can get his head around the other side of the stallion divider. So I know that there's plenty of horses, and my horses have done it too, when I have accidentally left them too long and they've got themselves over the other side. I know that if they're not panicked, that they can work it out and they can back up and squeeze themselves back and get themselves on the other side of that divider. But we always need to take it from a point of view or a perspective of, if the horse panics, what if there's a loud bang? What if there's a situation? What if I have to hit the brakes a little bit hard? What if someone pulls out in front of me? I need to take it from there. So if any of those scary situations happen, I want to make sure that my horse has got his head on the correct side of the divider. I want to make sure that it's the back of the trailer that stops my horse. It's not the halter that grabs him on the head. Okay, so it's all of those things that I've got to think of a worst case scenario, not the best conditions. Whenever I'm dealing with my horse in any situation, when I'm leaving him tied up or I'm doing anything, I always want to think, what's the worst thing that could happen here? That's why I heavily subscribe to tying my horses on ties that break or safety ties that slip. So I do the same thing in the trailer. I don't tie my horses solid. I tie my horses to either safety ties that slip rope so they can get a little bit of length of rope, or I tie them to something that is going to break, like a safety breakaway or baling twine or whatever it is that you've got, because I always think of the worst case scenario. You know, my horses all tie up. You could tie them to a tree all day and they're absolutely going to be there when you get back. But the one day that a big gust of wind blows a big sheet of metal off the stables and it starts, rolling towards them, and they pull back because they're trying to get away from something, that's the day I want them to be able to get off the tie. That's the day I want that tie to break. So, I always think that a worst case scenario situation is the day that I want them to be able to get away if they feel like they really, really need to. Obviously, I don't teach horses to tie up using a breakaway system. I use a progressive system that teaches them to come off the lead. But I always, from a safety perspective, tie my horses to breakaway. And I know that that's you're either in the black camp or you're in the white camp. You either tie to solid or you either tie to breakaway, and there's nothing in between. And I completely respect, people who tie their horses to solid things and they say, no, I subscribe to the solid. That's not a problem. I'm not one of those people. I subscribe to the breakaway system. So that's a personal choice and a personal opinion for you to have. But in the trailer, I like to definitely make sure that they've got room or they've got the ability to break away. The next thing that I want to talk about is when we're training our horses to load into the trailer. What I want to talk about is just making sure that we have the trailer secured to a vehicle. I have heard and seen people, and I know that I've turned up to properties and people have expected me to do a trailer, like they've booked me for a trailer loading back in the day when I used to do, private lessons and things like that. And they've called me and they've said, can you please come and teach my horse to get on the trailer? And I've turned up and the trailer hasn't been hooked up to a car. And I'll say, oh, okay, we need it hooked up to a car. And they'll say, oh, I've been practicing without the trailer tied to a vehicle. Now, the problem with that is that the jockey wheel is more than likely not rated to the weight of the horse. The jockey wheels are often just weighted to maybe 300 kilos. They're not even really weighted to the ones that come standard. I mean, some floating companies are probably different, but they're probably weighted to 300 to 500 kilos or something. My old trailer was 950 kilos. That doesn't mean the jockey wheel's going to fail. It could when the float's just sitting there, but certainly if you're putting a horse that weighs 500 kilos on and off the trailer, then it's likely that the jockey wheel is going to fail and it's going to collapse. Even putting them on blocks or bricks or whatever, have the trailer on a vehicle that is properly secured and all the clips are done and all that sort of stuff. The other end of that is that when your trailer is not secured to a vehicle with the tow ball and the tow hitch correctly, that when you load your horse on the back, the two wheels in the middle make this occur. Okay, so you think that the tailgate's going to stop it. Again, the tailgate is not going to stop. Your horse can hit a position about here that causes the trailer to flip backwards. And I've spoken to multiple people who didn't know not to load their horses on a trailer that wasn't secured to a vehicle, that the trailer has tipped up like this. And obviously that's a really scary situation for a horse that has trusted you to get in the trailer, and then the trailer has basically given way underneath him and the whole thing's flipped up and all the rest of it. So always, when you're trailer loading your horse, make sure that it is correctly secured to a vehicle. You're not relying on the jockey wheel and you're not relying on just the tailgate to support the weight of the trailer. When it comes to traveling with my horses, I personally, it depends on how far my trip is, how far I go in terms of resting them and things like that. I do like to pull up probably every couple of hours and at least allow the float to be stationary for 15 to 20 minutes. I don't necessarily unload the horses from the trailer when I do that, but it just allows them, obviously when they're traveling along in the trailer, they're constantly having to adjust their weight and they're constantly having to counteract the effects of the brakes and the acceleration and the turns and all that sort of thing. So they get what I call sea legs. So they get a little bit, they're using all those muscles and their muscles are working and all the rest of it. So it's like them trotting continuously. And I know there's been research and stuff like that done, so I'm not sure whether it's trotting continuously or cantering or something like that. I'm sure you can Google it and find out the actual research that's been done. But in any case, the horse is under constant pressure and the horse is under constant movement basically. So you want to stop every couple of hours and at least have the trailer stationary and have the horses being able to, bend, rest their legs and bend and sort of reshuffle and things like that. Any of you that have had the experience or have the regular experience of traveling on trains or trams, try standing on a tram or a train for your next trip without holding on with your hands, because horses don't have hands, and try and just balance and see how much it actually takes you to counteract the movement of that tram, which is just on rails. You know what I mean? Like they've got corners and things like that, but it's not the same for our horses that are in traffic. So that's something that we need to take into consideration. I do like to unload my horses at the 4-hour mark. If I'm traveling to a location that's at that 4 hours and sort of 4.5 hours or 4 hours and 20 minutes, I will push through and get to the 4.5 hours, because I would rather unload them at our final destination, so they can really get out and get put in a paddock or wherever they're going and really move around. I think that half an hour is just pushing them that little bit past that 4 hours is worth it, because it's the final destination, as opposed to stopping at the 2 hour mark, unloading them, letting them walk around, and then asking them to get back on the trailer. That said, if they're going sort of 5 hours and above, then I think that it's wise to have stops and be able to take the horses off and graze and things like that. The final suggestion that I want to share with you guys tonight is everyone that owns a trailer, I firmly believe that you should hook your trailer up and you get in your trailer. And I know that if there's any police officers watching or law enforcement or anything like that, they're probably going to start saying that this is illegal, which it probably is on public roads. But what I want you to do is get in your trailer and ask someone to drive your vehicle around, purely so you can have the experience and the understanding of not only what it feels like, but the noises that it makes. Recently, or in the last 6 months or so, I've had 2 different horses that were a little bit reluctant to load onto the trailer at the end of clinics. One of them, actually both of them had sort of said, the horse has always been fine, but I've only been trailing him. One had only been trailering him for like the last couple of weeks. He might have only been on the trailer maybe 4 times or something like that, and she said he's just getting progressively worse and more reluctant to get on the trailer. And when I got in the front of her trailer, without actually even moving it, I could see that there were chains hanging in the front, and I don't even know what the chains were for, but they were hanging on the ties. And I said to her, those chains, while you're driving, they would be rattling on the front of the trailer, which would be quite a disconcerting sound to the horse, and it could make him a little bit reluctant to get in the trailer because he's getting this, you know, rattling chains for the whole trip. Another lady had bought a brand new float, and it was a beautiful brand new trailer, and the horse, again, he'd only been in it a few times, and he was getting increasingly reluctant to get on the trailer. And I sort of looked at it, and I had a bit of a fiddle around, and I said, you know, I think that these rubber dividers, it was an angle load float, and it had the dividers that ran all the way to the floor. The rubber that they had used was actually quite light, and I said, I think that this rubber, when you're in transit, I think the rubber is swinging around and touching your horse on the legs. So he was trying to travel in the trailer, and he was getting basically brushed on the legs by this big flapping bit of rubber. And I can't remember whether she had got someone to drive her around and said that that was the case, but in any case, whether she even tested it herself, I don't know. But I do know that when she called the manufacturer and asked the question, they had said, oh yes, we have actually had people come back a couple of times and ask us to secure the rubber matting lower down to the ground so it wasn't swinging so much. Obviously some horses wouldn't be bothered by it, but this little horse, you know, he particularly was, and I can imagine what it felt like for him to have his legs touched all the time in transit every time he went around a corner, or you know, it would be intermittent, so every now and then he's just getting this rubber brushing up against his legs, and it was causing him a bit of distress, and it made him not want to get in the trailer. So having an experience in your own trailer, so you can be in there and not only understand what it feels like. I see so many people driving fairly fast around corners and things like that with our horses, and not probably understanding that the horse needs time to prepare to lean into corners and things like that, because they don't have hands to hang on to things. But also just experiencing the sounds in the trailer, the feeling, what happens with your dividers or anything like that. What rattles, what moves, what does this, what does that. So that's definitely something that I would recommend for every horse owner to do, is have a little bit of a trip in their own trailer and and see what it actually feels like for their horse. So these are my float loading tips that I particularly use when I'm traveling with my horses to keep both me and them as safe as I possibly can. I have actually got these on my YouTube channel as well, where I have demonstrated the self-loading and things. It's not an educational video by any means. I share much of the same information that I have tonight on this Monday Night Live on the YouTube, but I actually show you how I load my horses and the process and all that sort of stuff. So if you look up Tanja Kraus Horsemanship on YouTube, you will be able to find that video. So I hope that you enjoyed. Hey Jane, I hope that you enjoyed tonight's Monday Night Live, and the replay will be up on our Facebook page for about 48 hours until I get home, and then as I said last week, all of our Monday Night Lives are slowly being transferred over to our YouTube channel. This is our 29th or our 30th Monday Night Live, which is really exciting. But it also means that there's Monday Night Lives from 30 weeks ago. So if you're a fairly new viewer, feel free to go to our YouTube channel and you'll be able to start hunting down all the replays of our Monday Night Lives and find any topics that you find interesting. So I hope everyone had a great weekend with their horses, and I hope that you all stay safe. Let me know how you're going, and I hope to see you all soon. Have a great week.